Hello, we're back again here at Anthony's Restaurant on Manchester Road in the beautiful Portage Lakes area. Today it's going to be a little bit different. Pull your chairs up close because I'm going to tell you ghost stories. Two ghost stories of two different airplanes. One involved an Eastern Airlines Lockheed TriStar 1011 airliner that went down in the Florida Everglades. And the other is about a Grumman Mallard that went down in Lake Erie in 1951, owned by General Tires, the executive transport. So we're going to start with the Eastern Airlines 1011. And that was Flight 401. Some of you folks may remember there are a couple of movies made, TV movies made on it, and also a regular theater movie made. Been books written on it, and the main book was written back a few years after the flight. And that airplane took off from New York City on December 29 in 1972 with 175 passengers heading for Miami. Well, they reached Miami okay, and they're on the approach, put the landing gear down, and the nose gear light would not come on, giving a green light. So the captain, the first officer, and the flight engineer decided maybe it was the light. So they wanted to take the light out, which is common procedure. First thing you do is check the light, see if the light had burned out. And they couldn't tell from where they sat way up in the front of the airplane whether the nose gear was down or not. So they tried to get the light out, the bulb, but evidently the bulb was put in wrong. So there's much consternation. I read the accident report and I heard some of the talk also. And these people, the flight engineer, the first officer, and the captain had something like 50,000 flying hours between them. They decided that the only way to do this is to get down into what they called the hellhole, which is a cavernous area where the nose gear came up and down, also had a lot of electronics equipment in there. So the flight engineer was elected to go down into there and check and see if he could see the landing gear. They had some kind of little periscope device to see if the landing gear was down and locked. Well, in all the fiddling around, trying to get the light, somebody bumped the autopilot. The autopilot came off, and the three experienced men, plus there's an engineer from Eastern Airlines aboard the airplane riding the jump seat, and they didn't notice the airplane slowly descended right into the swamp at 220 miles an hour. Well, 101 people perished in the crash. The others survived, and then our story begins about the ghost airplane. And I read one account from a flight attendant, a Beverly Raposo, and she gave a weird story, an unusual story, that one of the other flight attendants she knew was a real religious Catholic gal, and she took her to a Catholic psychic, a woman who practiced in the Miami area, and this psychic told her that she's going to be in a horrendous air crash, but she will survive. This is before this happened. And told her to buy the medal, I believe it was Lady of Mount Carmel, and to wear that medal every time, all the time. So she had the medal on. 2 weeks later, she was involved in this accident, and she gave a graphic account. She said she moved away from the seat that she always sat in, and a couple of the other stewardesses moved over to where she sat. Well, they never survived. And this Beverly Raposo said the next thing she knew, she was upside down with fuel, jet fuel pouring in on her. And she said that the chute, the rubber chute that deploys to let people evacuate the airplane, deployed and wasn't fully inflated. And it covered her head, and a 400-pound galley came down on top of her, but this chute that was not fully deployed protected her. She said if it had fully deployed, it would bounce off, the thing would have bounced off, and the 400-pound galley would have crushed her. So she said she was saved by that covering provided by this rubber chute that was not fully inflated. And of course, she's left the airline after that, and she said that she was She clutched her Mount Carmel medal, Lady of Mount Carmel, and she was saved. And so many of the other people in the back were perished in that accident. So that's one part of that aircraft crash that is strange. And she said she was protected. She knew the minute she looked up and saw this chute over top of her that somebody was protecting her. Now we're going to show you this huge jet airliner. And that is the Lockheed TriStar 1011 from Eastern Airlines. And it all happened because the flight crew was so engrossed in fixing this light bulb and seeing whether the nose gear was down or not. They bumped the autopilot off, so the airplane descended at 220 miles an hour. Well, many parts of the aircraft were salvaged, and Eastern at the time was taking delivery on more of these 1011 aircraft. They take them what they call green, meaning they put their own furnishings in. So, as all airlines, they're very thrifty people, and they took a lot of pieces that were salvageable from the wrecked airplane, and they stuck those pieces in other aircraft. Then the problem started. On a flight on one of these new aircraft, one of the flight attendants was in the galley, and she looked and she saw the agonized face of this flight engineer who died in the crash staring out at her. She called the captain, everybody else, and they all confirmed what she saw. Then it really gained momentum because something like 22 different accounts on different airplanes that used parts from the crashed Flight 401 had apparitions of the captain, the agonized face of the captain, and the agonized face of the flight engineer appear in the galley section where most of the parts were used. And that was also noted by Lockheed, that they put warnings on those parts, that they came from the ghost airplane. They called them the ghosts of Flight 401. A book was written by a gentleman by the name of Fuller, which went into great detail about this. And he named names, gave dates and times, and these people were airline captains, airline pilots, attendants, passengers that saw these apparitions. So the theory is that these people did not want to die, obviously, and they don't believe they were dead. So they're appearing in these aircraft. And Eastern had quite a time for a while because none of the crew would fly the airplanes where the apparitions appeared. So finally, they gave in to the old tried and true method. And I'm going to tell you about that and the ghost of Flight 401 in just a moment after this message. This is since 1954, serving the Akron area with quality printing, copying, digital archiving, and we do a lot of different things at ESCO. For example, here's one of the booklets that we print on glossy covers, glossy paper. Here's another size we can do. We also do newsletters for a number of companies around. We get them out on time, in fact, ahead of time, at an extremely reasonable price. At ESCO, we reproduce technical training manuals from World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and almost up to the present. And these are put on VHS, taken off the regular official training films, put onto VHS, and we can also take your VHS and put it on discs for you. We've done that for a number of people. And we also want to mention the TV show, the Ernie Stavnik Show. And Mr. Businessman, give us a call at ESCO, and they'll route it over to me. We can come out to your place, and you are the best salesman for your business. You can tell us what your business is like and do a great job. So give us a call. We're back again with the story of the ghost of Eastern Airlines Flight 401. And after the crews refused to fly in these aircraft, Eastern tried everything, but that was it. These people would not get into the airplanes. So Eastern took a suggestion, and they took 4 of their captains who were ordained ministers. And these men got into the airplane, walked around the airplane and talked, sat down in the airplane, and they talked to these so-called apparitions. They said I don't know whether they were visible to these men or not, but they talked, and they told him that you have a right to go. Leave now because you are no longer of this world. And they prayed. 4 ordained ministers were airline captains, and this is all documented in Mr. Fuller's book and in some of the reports that you could get actually online by going on to Ghost of 401. Extensive information on the internet, extensive information in Mr. Fuller's book. So that did it. From that point on, from the praying that the captains did, I guess you call it, is it an exorcism? When you do it to an airplane? I thought exorcisms were people. But anyway, the apparitions never again appeared. Evidently these fellows, those that had gone, were satisfied that, okay, it's okay for them to leave. They did perish in the flight. They can't come back again. And that was the end of that. Now, how does this tie in with the crash of the Grumman Mallard that was owned by General Tire? Well, some of the things are similar, meaning both as ghost airplanes. The Grumman Mallard was owned by General Tire and Rubber Company as an executive airplane. It carried 8 to 10 people, crew of 2, pilot and co-pilot. It was an amphibian, meaning the wheels come down, it could land on land, land on water. This particular day was June 29th, 1951 at 4 p.m. The chief pilot, and I won't name him because he left the company shortly after this happened and went to California. But anyway, he's an experienced naval aviator and an instructor in amphibian airplanes in the Navy. So there are some executives, General Tire executives in Toronto that wanted picked up. They called him on a Saturday and he couldn't find his regular co-pilot, so he took an employee from General Tire who was a private pilot and had him sit in the right seat. And this fellow had a visitor come in and he says, well, can this fellow go along? The chief pilot, sure. Well, they took off from Akron, Muni, heading right toward Toronto. And we're going to show you the map where the airplane went in. What happened, and no one knows why, the chief pilot decided to show these fellows a landing on Lake Erie. And we will show you a map where it went in just off of Geneva on the Lake, about 5 miles north of the little town of Geneva on the Lake. And he didn't notice, and he should have. I don't want to criticize the guy now because he's long gone, but the swells were over 3 feet according to the witnesses. And they landed, and the swell hit, or rather the pond to the float on the right side snapped off when it hit a swell. Well, the pilot immediately, full power on, tried to pull up. He pulled up and he stalled the airplane. Then it went in nose first, and the nose gear door was bashed in. Immediately, water just flooded the airplane, and the airplane was like this for a while. For roughly, 5 or 10 minutes, the pilot got out, the fellow sitting in the back got out, but the co-pilot didn't. He perished in the accident. After about 20 minutes or so, the airplane settled like this and then slowly disappeared from the surface and obviously landed straight up on the bottom of Lake Erie. They did get the man out who drowned in the accident. So once again, the airplane, and Lake Erie is a shallow lake, but that airplane has never been found to this day. And it's a big airplane, 220-mile-an-hour airplane, and there are only 59 built, but the Japanese used some of them on the inter-island runs, and they put 30 people in the airplane. Of course, they were smaller people. So you see that it was a good-sized airplane. And now how could a good-sized airplane like that disappear in a shallow lake like Lake Erie? And Lake Erie being a freshwater lake, there's surmise that the airplane probably would survive intact for a number of years unless the zebra mussels got it, but it would not deteriorate the way it would in salt water. So to this day, that Grumman Mallard has never been found. There have been rewards offered. We'll show you this also, the reward for the location of that aircraft. And also, we'll show you this in a close-up, the map of where the airplane went in and where the search area was. To this day, once again, it has never been found. The airplane currently is owned by a fellow by the name of Malcolm Miller, who lives right here in Manchester, Ohio. And at the time, he was running Manchester Air Salvage. And he bought the airplane in 1960 from General Tire for something like $2,500. And for years, he's offered a reward for anybody that can locate that aircraft. And he'd take care of raising it from the surface of Lake, or from the bottom of Lake Erie. So there's your other mystery. How did that airplane disappear in Lake Erie, a shallow lake? Now, the currents would indicate that it was probably shoved out, maybe farther to the north, northeast. But still, with all the sonar equipment and technical equipment available, and why couldn't this airplane be found? I heard that the government is going to map every object on the floor of Lake Erie. Maybe they'll find it. But Malcolm, he was going to be on today, but he's up in his 80s, and he didn't feel well enough to come on and tell us about it. But he's the guy that's offered the reward since 1960. About 47 years, people have been looking for that airplane. Why can't it be found? The airplane, back then, I think General Tire paid $250,000 for that airplane. That airplane today, if it were in flyable condition, would be worth well over $1 million. So from the time it went in, you know that people were searching for that airplane because they could bring the engines, the instruments, everything else. And these people that rebuild these aircraft, they can start with bushel baskets full of parts. So the airplane was well worth the effort. Now Malcolm tells me that two Canadian gentlemen, young men, are going to take latest sonar equipment they've devised. They're sonar experts, and they're going to look for this airplane. Well, I hope they find it, and good luck to them. But Malcolm also made the offer to me and to the Military Air Preservation Museum that they could have the airplane if they could bring it up, if they could find it and bring it up. Well, so far, the museum contacted some local people, sheriff's deputies, sheriff's departments, and all for training, scuba diver training, to try to go find the airplane. Well, there wasn't much interest in it because so many people have tried already. Why can't the airplane be found? That's the big question. And it is a big airplane, as I showed you before. And Ray, our super-duper cameraman, is going to give you a close-up picture of it. It's a luxurious airplane, big interior. I've ridden in those Mallards. They're stand-up. You can walk around inside it. So a big airplane like that is the big mystery. I call it the ghost airplane. Now, let's connect it to the Lockheed TriStar airliner, the ghost of 401. That these people that were killed did, those 2 or 3 crew members that did not want to die, that showed up in the parts and scared the living life out of everybody. Okay, let your imagination run wild at this point. Maybe this Grumman Mallard on the bottom of Lake Erie and the gentleman who perished in that airplane, maybe his apparition, once again, let your imagination run wild on this one. That maybe he is riding that airplane and evading anybody trying to find that airplane, because if they find it, then he will know that he's dead. Now, that's a stretch, I know, but it does make a good story. And once again, Malcolm is open to offers of anybody to try to find that airplane. He hasn't given any. Well, these 2 fellows in Canada are going to try again. But there you have it. You want to make $1 million? Just raise this air, find the airplane, raise it, refurbish it, and sell it. Once again, there's only 59 of them left, well made. There's probably about 40 of them still flying. One of them went down, was owned by Chalk's Airline, as folks will remember. Last winter, it took off from Miami, and one of the wings came off. So maybe we're going to have a story out of Miami about this, because I think there are 12 passengers and 3 crew members aboard that one. But maybe the ghost of the Grumman Mallard will show up again in that accident down in Miami. Well, folks, I didn't mean to scare you that bad, but I'm trying to connect those two. Once again, it's a story. There's a lot of truth to it, except the stretch I gave you to say that this fellow is still flying or maneuvering that airplane, evading anybody trying to find it. That's the big stretch. And I only did it because it made a good story. But the true stories of the flight, or the ghosts of Flight 401, you can find the information on the internet. The main library has the book, The Ghost of 401, written by Mr. Fuller. So if you're interested, you can look it up on the internet, and there's a tremendous body of information, and the people that have made a hobby out of this Ghosts of Flight 401. So whether you believe this or don't believe it, it still makes a good story. And I hope I didn't scare you too bad. Thank you for being with us.